We are recording. Hi everyone. Welcome to Entrepreneurs 11. This is the second episode, and with me I have Miss Nina Hersher. She's the co-founder and CEO of Digital Wellness Collective, among a host of other things. Hi Nina, and welcome to Entrepreneurs 11.
Hi, Jayesh. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Without wasting any more time, we'll jump right into my first segment, which we call Gully Cricket. Right, so it's just a short deep dive into your childhood, right? So if you could share some insights from your personal life, what was your childhood like? Where were you born? How was the experience?
Oh, is that all? Okay. Well, there is so much I could share. My journey into digital wellness was actually extremely personal from my childhood. So, growing up, I had a very, very hard time talking. I've been in speech therapy since I was about 4 or 5. And sometimes, it would just be exhausting to try and say a few words. And so I would just watch people instead. And the other thing is that I really, when I was trying to talk, eye contact was how I let people know I was trying to communicate with them. And I was noticing even as a child that there was less and less eye contact happening, and people wouldn't even know I was trying to speak to them because they were texting. And so I got to see at a very, very young age what mobile technology especially was doing to people's presence and people's relationships. And
Okay.
I was also raised quite holistically. And so I was lucky to be able to go to a lot of retreats that were just kind of naturally technology free. Now we would call them digital detox. But I got to see that. And so I think at that young age, I really witnessed the extremes. And I was hoping to find a healthy place in the middle.
Oh, okay, that's great. So, something about your hobbies. What are your extracurricular interests apart from your core work?
Yeah, so I love rock climbing, I love hiking, I love swimming in general. So anything involving water, I am there. I think that nature is extremely healing. So I think that almost all of my hobbies are definitely outside.
That's great. That's great. So, my first question in with respect to entrepreneurship would be that when did you decide to get into entrepreneurship? I mean, was it always in the back of your mind, or it was a spur of the moment thought? How did it work out?
It was always in my mind, but as you know, we've just created this institute program. So I was looking around for a long time to see what this kind of topic was that I was witnessing, but there wasn't a program for it. And so I actually I went to my undergraduate degree in sociology because I was just kind of interested in human behavior. And then they didn't have quite the classes I like, so I actually went abroad to the University of Edinburgh, and they have really incredible classes on youth culture. And I remember this distinct moment where the professor was talking about something so small as the fact that we used to say hello and that phone was attached to the wall. And so that phone being physically attached to the wall would inform the content and the length of the conversation. And so even something as small as the cordless phone just in the home really changed the way that people communicated and the privacy and so many other things. And I remember hearing that and just thinking, we're getting closer to what I'm seeing. And so that was really the beginning. And then I went to grad school for clinical social work, and I was focused on the children and youth track, but I actually ended up individualizing my degree in norms of connectivity and how those norms are really reconceptualizing our human development.
Sure. That's amazing. And I think you were talking about some difficulty in holding conversations and maintaining attention of others, right? So it's probably experiences like these that help you, shape you as the kind of entrepreneur that you are today. So if you could share some light on maybe a few other experiences that you remember that help you become the person that you are today.
There were so many of those. I think that a lot of them did happen in school, just looking at my peers and understanding how stressed about technology everyone was. And so
Sure.
when I was doing my clinical practicum in graduate school, I was implementing a program at the University Health Center that basically looked at undergrads' academic achievement in relation to their usage of technology and their self-care. And I
Sure.
remember doing that program and just thinking, this is all I want to do, because there are a lot of different factors of digital wellness. And when we're talking about digital wellness, we're, talking about what is the optimal way that someone can use technology for their health and well-being. So it's almost like the digital is in parentheses, and
Right.
this is just about wellness in this age of connection. And
Right.
so I think that implementing that program also just brought to my attention that it takes so many forms, and one of those forms is, when we're plugged in, when all of these kids were plugged in, were they being the most productive they could be, or were they getting distracted? And most of them are getting extremely distracted. And when they were taking a break, was that break effectively recharging them? And just seeing so many kids come in and like they weren't taught the proper way to retain information to get through their classes in this age of distraction, that was very informative on me and how I practice this work.
Right, right. And I think a lot of personal aspects also, show as far as your work is concerned. Your dedication to the cause, your enthusiasm towards bringing people together. Perhaps these formative years were instrumental in shaping you to be the kind of entrepreneur that you are today, right?
Absolutely.
Right, and I think that's wonderful, the cause that you are pursuing. So in the next segment, which we call Power Play, right, and we actually deep dive into the venture or the story behind the venture, right? So my first question to you of this segment would be that if you could share something about digital wellness movement at large, and then about the digital wellness collective.
Yeah, so the digital wellness movement was born out of a lot of different things before that term was used frequently. And so what had happened was there was a release of updates on both iPhone and Android that allowed us to more easily track our time online and our time on screens. And those screen time tracking updates came out almost 3 years ago now. And so I was invited to be a part of a group, and that group was forming a petition to Apple, because what had happened was there were a lot of existing apps that did similar things that were out there already that weren't being released on behalf of the large tech companies. And Android saw those apps, and kind of said, we can all exist together, no problem. And Apple started to quietly shut down the apps that they really deemed as competition in different ways. And so we came together as this community, which was called the Digital Wellness Warriors, which is a phrase that you probably heard us use even today. And we formed this petition to Apple to really stop that behavior. And afterwards, that just kind of landed beautifully into what you see now, which is the Digital Wellness Collective, which is the only trade association of researchers, practitioners, organizations who are dedicated to the intentional use and development of technology for human relationships. And in our mission statement there, it really describes who is in the collective, because we have the educators and we have the developers who are actually creating the tech that's going to be healthier for us to use. And it's very, very important to us that these two groups work together. And so that is the really short version of how the collective was formed out of this much more grassroots movement to meet a need of this emerging industry and all of the incredible entrepreneurs working so hard in it.
Right. And in fact, I was going through a couple of reports that have been published by Rescue Time and Forbes, and it seems that to the tune of 35 to 40% of time is lost because of uncontrolled smartphone usage. And I think what the Digital Wellness Collective is doing right now is amazing, and more importantly, it is highly relevant. So, actually, if you could share the core driving thought or the core objective behind the Digital Wellness Collective, and what do you wish to achieve with the Digital Wellness Collective in short term and long term?
Yeah, so in the short term, the collective was really formed because we wanted to give people a place to go to network and to see different opportunities within the industry as it grew. And so just like there are trade collectives for doctors and for all of these different kind of organizations that say, here is the here's the most up-to-date training, here's the most up-to-date research, and here is, you know, a way to attend different conferences and events. There really wasn't something for our field yet. And so that was kind of the short-term objective of why we formed. And the long term and really getting to know people in the collective has been there's this call. There's this call for more information and there's this call for action. And we saw that especially after Digital Wellness Day, which was the first holiday we launched. And that was on May 1st. In 2021, it's going to be on May 7th. And it was really an opportunity to educate people about what digital wellness is. And so it was beautiful to witness every company, almost every company in the collective held an event. We had about 35,000 people attend our events across the world. And all of these were online because of COVID. And then we reached 1.2 million people totally with all of our educational materials. And so after that, there was this very, very clear call that people wanted to unify around an educational program because everyone has different training. It's actually very interesting. Over 70% of leaders of companies in the collective have gone to graduate school. And so there's all this education, but the entry points to this topic are so different. And so that's actually what formed the Digital Wellness Institute, which is our educational arm, was to give the companies in the collective and other people out there the opportunity to go through an immersive 10-week digital wellness certificate program that would actually give them the tools to teach this so we can all speak the same language, because that's really one of our long-term goals, is being able to speak the same language so we are explaining digital wellness in a consistent and approachable way, and also, you know, creating more courses on each of those topics in the certificate program.
Right, right, right. And I think that's wonderful. The cause and the effort to that direction is going phenomenally well, it seems. So, bit of a difficult question, at least it would seem. What has been your most harrowing experience? What has been the most difficult situation that you've been in as an entrepreneur?
I think that I'm very lucky because my social work training taught me a lot of mediation skills and how to kind of keep the peace and how to be collaborative. And I like to think I was wired that way even before this training. But I think one of the most challenging experiences as an entrepreneur in digital wellness specifically is really truly understanding and enacting how we can collaborate versus compete with each other. Right. Because especially in such a new field, that can be challenging at times. But I think, you know, even before that challenge, there was this general entrepreneurial challenge of there's no paid job I can apply for in this work, so what do I do? And so what I chose to do was really to create my own individualized educational track within a respected existing program, as well as to launch my own coaching and consulting company. And so that's really the advice I like to give people is, you know, always, you know, have that clarity and execute what you see, even if you're the only one to see it, as well as maintain some type of traditional employment so you can keep that income until the other thing takes off. And juggling those two things is really challenging, but I think so rewarding, both professionally and personally.
Right, right, right. So I want to pick off on one point that you mentioned, that there is no paying job or there is no existing job that you know, in this sector or in this area of expertise. So I wanted to understand what new challenge does venturing into this kind of an area, or an area where jobs don't exist or the area itself is not established. What kind of challenges does that pose to the entrepreneur vis-a-vis something which is more established? It's just that you are getting a new venture in. And how did you deal with those challenges?
Yeah, so it's something that's very much still ongoing, but essentially there are jobs in this industry that are fruitful, but we have to create them. And so, for example, before COVID hit, I was doing a lot of traveling and corporate speaking, and now I do primarily online events. And so there's just been kind of a transition of, what is doable. And so there are a lot of organizations in the collective that are doing extremely well. There are also, some organizations in the collective that are doing this work part-time and have that other job, as we kind of discussed earlier. And so I think one of the things that's exciting but is also a challenge is looking at how can we together create an infrastructure where we can pull in different teachers for different things. And so that is another, hope for the Institute one day. It's going to take a few years, is to be able to pull in the experts to teach even more of the courses, because right now we have one large course, but we'd like to have smaller courses, or we would like to be able to refer out to different people who truly specialize in different things. But there are a few things that have to happen before that. The first thing is that people have to decide what they specialize in. And you're familiar with our kind of digital flourishing wheel. And so as long as everyone continues to say, I teach about productivity and childcare and all of these different things, it's very hard to refer to a specialist in one thing. And so that's just naturally changing on its own. And the other thing is that we, in the long term, do want to figure out, what is a good strategy to raise money or to do something in such a way that we can actually hire the people who are incredible educators already doing this work and plug them into a much larger educational framework that really is global in its reach. And so all of these things take a lot of time, but with the Institute, we've started that journey, and that was very much on purpose with kind of our goals from the beginning and where we would like to go.
Right. Fantastic. So I want to, again, I would like you to share some insights into the digital flourishing model that you just shared, right? And if you could give a brief about what this model is.
Yeah, so the digital flourishing model and that framework is really our unique approach. And so we had it trademarked earlier this year because we thought it was just so powerful, and that's really what sets us apart. And so what sets the collective and all of the incredible companies in it apart is that we do have this kind of healthy tech versus anti-tech way of approaching all of this. And so the digital flourishing approach essentially refers to a mindful usage of technology where we can flourish with it and we can enjoy everything it has to offer, as well as, knowing when to unplug and avoiding some of those typical harms like blue light, like eye fatigue, like all of those different things. And so, basically looking at how we can flourish with our technology usage. And we have all different categories of flourishing. And so our categories are productivity, environment, communication, relationships, mental health, quantified self, and digital citizenship. And physical health. I think I forgot to mention that one. That one's really important. And so all of these things are very deeply connected to each other. And when someone comes to me and they say, Nina, I really want to work on my relationship with my husband, I say, okay, so that's in the relationships category, but there are so many other parts of that flourishing model, that kind of holistic approach that are connected. So we have to look at environment, like is that couple bringing all of those electronics into their room and ignoring each other? What does their communication look like? And so you'll kind of see that nothing is truly separate, but it is very helpful to learn about the topics individually so that you can have that holistic framework at the end.
Right. And I think the model itself is very all-encompassing. Essentially, if I understand the Digital Wellness Collective, it is a very people-heavy business, right? It's practically all about people, right? So what contrast do you see when you are running a people-centric business vis-a-vis maybe a service-oriented or a product business, right? So as an entrepreneur, what kind of challenges become different for you as opposed to the other conventional businesses?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think it is very people centric in the fact that I consider myself to be colleagues and friends with a lot of the different leaders in the collective, and that's also, happened because we really have been the pioneers, so to speak, and we've gone through a lot together. Um, but with a people centric business, there definitely is a lot of energy spent on relationships, and that's exactly where it needs to be spent. And so you need to earn people's trust, you need to maintain people's trust. And while you can't have a deep relationship with everyone because it's just not natural, you can do it with most people. And so the way that we've designed our events that happen, like we have certain calls that happen once a month, we have certain calls that happen once a quarter, and we used to hold a lot of events in person. It really did emphasize that people centric approach. And so I think our leadership was always very, very interested in how we could continuously do that with regular events that we can actually, come together on. And so there was even talk of what would it look like for us to hold a giant conference together and have every single individual in the collective present on their specialty if they wanted to. And so these are just, some of the things that we think about. And as the collective has grown to be, just over 100 organization, that becomes harder and harder. But we've been thinking about having one large conference in the US and one large conference in Europe. And so there are ways to go about it. And that's what we're really interested in after COVID, is being able to bring everyone together for that kind of human contact and that connection that everyone seems to be craving.
Right, right. And I think perhaps one question on these lines again would be that I'm sure you would interact with a lot of people from different cultures, right? And essentially that would bring in a different set of challenges as far as addressing the cause as well as keeping everybody together is concerned. So how do you, what are the considerations that you keep in mind, or what do you do to address those issues?
We've been very lucky that all of the people in the collective seem to be quite collaborative. And so our largest hubs of organizations right now are in New York, California, Canada, London. We've had a recent kind of surge in India and Ireland. And then we have a few companies in Argentina and Africa. And so unfortunately, we're not as old, as mature as an organization yet to be able to translate everything into all the different languages, which is a sorrow of mine, but we'll get there, hopefully. And what we were able to do is with the digital flourishing survey that we have for free at digitalflourishing.com, we were able to work with different companies in the collective to translate that. So while the only version that's available, actively on that website is in English, we actually have had that survey translated into French and Italian. And so that's kind of how we're starting to address it, is we're saying, okay, like who wants to be the almost brand leader in different countries, and is that person interested in translating some of the collaborative free resources that we've created to give them to their community. And so I think the language barrier hasn't been a big issue yet. I expect it will be in the future. And on the diversity, equity, and inclusion front, we absolutely want to address that as we're able to with our resources. So that's, I think, one of the biggest things that we've seen with this global international audience.
Right. That's again wonderful. So we move on to the next segment, which is called Silly Point, right? And this would be more on the lines of a rapid fire, right? So it's more of a back and forth thing, right? So firstly, if there is one go-to piece of literature what would that be?
Just one. My co-founder, Amy Blankson, wrote an incredible book called The Future of Happiness. Amy is on the UN Global Happiness Council. And so that was written, before the collective was formed. But I think there's just an incredible amount of tips in there that are very actionable for most people. And so I think that's the one I would recommend.
Okay, wonderful. If there is one piece of advice that you could now give to maybe a 10 or a 12-year-old Nina, what would that be?
I think it would be to start even earlier and to trust myself. I think that it's very, natural for children to kind of look around for permission to pursue different things. But if I had started some kind of like a journal, or if I had written a novel and just kind of let myself be interested in what I was interested in without worrying about like, why is nobody else caring about like how much is on their phones? Is it just me? I think that starting even earlier is the advice I would give myself. And that, mostly has to do with clarity. So once you have clarity, trust yourself and follow through.
Sure, that's a very, very sound piece of advice. So, if you were to become the world technology president, let's assume, right? What would be the first thing that you would do?
The first thing I would do as what exactly?
As the world technology or the world tech president. So it's a hypothetical post that you get. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, I think I would do a lot of education on surveillance capitalism, which is something that we're, talking about with that newfound the social dilemma. And so this idea is, basically that we are the precious commodity and that our attention is being used as an extractable resource. And so there are all of these technologies around us that are really just watching us all the time and using all of this information and all of this data. And I would do a lot of education on that. There was a really great quote last night from one of our experts, which was, if you don't see, I'm gonna mess it up. It was something.
A product, then you are the product.
Then you are the product. Yeah, and they were talking about a menu specifically, and that just hit so home for me. I think that once that clicks for people, they'll be like, oh, I should be paid for providing my information. I should be paid for. And so in that role, I would definitely do education on that, because I think we're seeing that is the most effective way to empower people to change their behavior, because we want privacy and we want to be confident in understanding how everything works. So I think education is always the first step.
Right. And I think this is going to be one of the most important consideration in the times to come. So a little more on the lighter side kind of a question. So what is your guilty pleasure?
My guilty pleasure. My guilty pleasure is probably cooking. It's really interesting. So I use cooking to procrastinate, but I think it's really healthy. So it started in grad school. I wouldn't want to write like that, like large essay, and I would just cook myself these elaborate meals. And that's kind of how I learned to cook, is I would just procrastinate and I would play with different ingredients. I don't really follow recipes. And I think that even to this day, that is my guilty pleasure, but it is a very nourishing guilty pleasure.
Yeah, and I think that's an amazing way to be a little more popular among friends and family, right? Every time you want to
Yes,
procrastinate, you could cook something up and call people out.
absolutely.
Right. Your favorite holiday destination?
My favorite holiday destination would probably actually be Colorado, which is where I just moved. I grew up in Connecticut, so I'm very accustomed to, winter, spring, summer, fall. I was in California for a while, but here, for example, in the summer, we just got a foot of snow. And so I think just having different types of weather is very invigorating for me, and it's good to see change, and it brings inspiration to the work that I'm doing to see those changes outside happening naturally.
Fair point. Apart from the social dilemma, your all-time favorite movie?
I really enjoyed The Parent Trap with Lindsay Lohan for the longest time as a child. She was one of my favorite actresses. That's changed drastically, but that would definitely make the younger version of me list.
Okay, fair point. Your favorite band or musical artist?
I really don't have one. I listen to everything, including country. I listen to everything. I was just raised with all different music playing around me, and I'm actually a journey dance teacher, which is a type of um, dance that basically realigns the chakras. And so I really enjoy music without lyrics as well, because I think that dancing to different types of songs with different types of rhythms can be really healing emotionally and physically.
Fair. So, if there is one regret that you have, or if there is something that you could do differently during your journey, what would that be?
I don't really have any, because I think that we're in the exact right place right now. I think the only thing I mentioned earlier is I would give myself permission to begin earlier, and not look around to make sure that there were enough people doing it to warrant me trying it.
Right. Fair. I will give you two or three choices. So you'll have to choose one of the two, right?
Okay.
Um, California or Colorado?
Right now, Colorado.
Okay, quite diplomatic of you. Um, Speaking or teaching?
Teaching.
Right. Mountains or beaches?
Mountains.
Mountains. Okay. Rock climbing or swimming?
Swimming.
Swimming. Okay, fair. So we come to the end of this segment. My last and final segment is called slog overs, right? So if you have created one BHAG or big hairy audacious goal for you, what would that be?
That would be for the Institute to be the go-to resource for people who want to start being a digital wellness educator, specifically for adults. I have a lot of great appreciation for the Center for Humane Technology and for Common Sense Media. Center for Humane Technology is really focused on policy and teaching technology developers how to develop, and Common Sense Media has a large focus on children. We're really targeting and enjoy working with the practitioners, and the adults who want to teach this work. And so that would be my one big goal, and it's already being set into motion. So we are thrilled about that.
Right. And I think both Tristan and Jim are doing fabulous work in the field, and it's going to be. And I'm sure Digital Wellness Institute also would become the go-to thing the way it is going. How can somebody join the digital wellness movement or the digital wellness collective? How do they reach out? What do they do?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few different ways. So the Digital Wellness Collective is kind of reserved for digital wellness organizations that have an active offering. And so the digital wellness offering needs to be articulated on a website, which I know is a bit ironic, but that's how people find each other these days. Um, and so if someone does have an active digital wellness company, they are eligible to join the collective, and there's a form on our website. And then if someone wants to join the institute, I mean, anyone can really take our institute programming, and I will put a link in the chat here for you to share
Right.
later on. But on this page, we kind of have everything. And so we have a link to let us know if someone, wants to hold a custom offering at their organization. We have a email list. When someone joins our email list, they can also, get access to our free event planning toolkit.
Mhm.
So the email list is kind of for the general public who wants to see the events we're holding, and then the collective is for the practitioners.
Right, right. Um, my second last question to you would be, in a lot of evolving startup or entrepreneurial ecosystems, um, the proportion or the ratio of female to male entrepreneurs or female to male driven ventures is slightly on the lower side. So, what message would you pass on, or what guiding tips would you give to girls or young women to enter into the startup ecosystem or enter into the entrepreneurial ecosystem?
Yeah, we somewhat accidentally ended up with a team of almost entirely
Right, right.
women. And that was very interesting to us. We have Alex and Andrew who are on our team, and they actually, just joined in the past 6 months. But in terms of the people who are still running the company and who have expanded the institute, we're all women. And so I would say to young girls, not to be intimidated, and again, to fine tune your offering, and to fine tune your voice, because once you have that, no one can take that away from you. And so if that looks like writing, doing a blog, like really anything tangible, to develop that early in life, because it will help with the confidence, and just to apply for things and to speak up loudly, because I think sometimes, it can be hard to speak up loudly, but if someone is drawn to a job, there is a reason that they're drawn to that job. And so go for it, see what happens, and get as many letters of recommendation as possible.
Right, and I think Digital Wellness Institute or collective both would not have to worry about gender representation, right? It's a live example of how things are going. And my final question to you would be, uh, if there are any parting words, or if there are any tips that you would want to give to budding entrepreneurs, right? Keeping in mind that they come from diverse age groups, different backgrounds, economically, socially, and different cultures. So, if there are any tips that you would like to share with them, any go-to things, it would be great.
Yeah, I think my biggest tip, Jayesh, is to emphasize self-care, because being an entrepreneur involves hustling. I don't unplug at 8 p.m. just to unplug at 8 p.m. If I'm
Yeah.
feeling creative and I want to work until 2 a.m., I let myself. So I think that this kind of notion and recommendation of having a flexible routine is really important. And so I think what that looks like practically is to make sure that in the morning, around lunchtime, or on your break, and in the evening, you have different activities that you can do
Right.
that are recharging for you. And it often is not realistic or practical to do the same activities every single day, which is why we have this kind of notion of flexible self-care routine. And so for myself, I love to write and draw, and I'm holding up a Rocket book, but it's hard to see right now. And I literally have a list of like morning activities, you know, break activities, evening, and I make sure I do at least 2 from every list every
Right.
day. And that's how I maintain my energy to keep doing the amazing work that I'm drawn to doing, that's also quite hard at times.
Right, and I think that's a fantastic way to go about things, Nina, because you don't get into the trap of setting yourself up to fail, right? So it lets
Yes.
you go, it lets you unleash your creativity without being too constrictive or restrictive, right? Thanks a lot, Nina, for taking out time. I think that's all we have for today. It was lovely connecting with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for having me. I will talk to you soon.
Yep, thanks.